I'm happy to have everyone here for another honest conversation, part of a research. What started as a research for a documentary, but by now these conversations have taken a life of their own. And I'm very happy to have different guests from all areas, different people who are engaged with the problem of anti-Semitism, come here, talk to me, talk to Dr. Laitman, and together try to get to the root of the problem of anti-Semitism, which is not going away. Obviously, as usual, like, comment, subscribe below. We're also live on the Jew Function Facebook, so if you're seeing us, great. Feel free to send questions and comments. Maybe we'll get to them. With us, as usual, Dr. Michael Laitman, Doctor of Biocybernetics, PhD in Philosophy and Kabbalah, author of more than 50 books translated into 18 languages, including like a bundle of reads, Why Unity and Mutual Guarantee Are the Call of the Hour. Dr. Laitman, you have spent years talking about the issue of anti-Semitism, and with the recent coronavirus crisis, you have addressed even that most recent rise as well. So very happy to have you with us here. And also with us today, I'm very happy to have a fellow media person. I'm happy to introduce Dario Helman. He's a communications professional specializing in the digital space with quite a few landmarks, including some of the most successful Israel-advocacy initiatives in the Spanish-speaking world. You're also an educator in the fields of psychology and religion, and also working on an interesting interfaith initiative, which I hope to hear about later in the conversation. You were born in Buenos Aires, but lived pretty much everywhere, really a man of the world. So thank you for being with us here, Dario.
For you.
Excellent. So I want to get right to it, because people who have been listening to these conversations, they have a fairly good understanding of Dr. Laitman's general idea of the origin of the Jewish people, where they're from. I want to start actually in the present. I followed very closely the news as the coronavirus has spread throughout the world, and sure enough, very early on, Jews started to be blamed for the plague, like almost any other plague that we've had. So I want to ask the first question to both of you. Maybe we'll start with Dr. Laitman. Why are Jews blamed yet again for this plague? What is it about this that no other group in the world is being blamed for?
Well, the truth is it never went away. There are waves with regard to anti-Semitism. The relation to Jews is always different by all the people in the world. Every single person in the world has some kind of relation to the Jews, some kind of an attitude to the Jews. And it's very interesting. It's a very interesting phenomenon. It was studied and it's still misunderstood for thousands of years. The thing is that we have to look at the roots. The people of Israel started in Babylon. In Babylon, there was a crisis, a very big crisis. People suddenly started feeling that they are competing with one another, just like today. And they started quarreling with one another. Among them was a Babylonian priest whose name was Abram. His father, Terach, was also a priest. Meaning, he was tending to people, telling them how they should pray, how they should bow to nature. It's written. Abraham discovered that the strife that the Babylonians were getting into among themselves is a very special kind of strife, because it stems from the growth of the ego among them, the egoism, which is the force that makes everyone want to be superior to others, doesn't let them be equal. That egoistic desire that suddenly grew within them brought them into these conflicts. So then he started to explain to people, to the people who were in Babylon, This was approximately 3,500 years ago, more or less. So so he got into a conflict with Nimrod, king of Babylon. Nimrod wouldn't have Abraham putting things in order, although Abraham was a great thinker. He was a great ideologist in Nimrod's kingdom. But Abraham started to arrange the Babylonian society by saying we should do the opposite. We shouldn't go with our ego, with our competitiveness, with our hatred for each other. We should go for mutual connection. We're all basically the same peoples, clans, all living in Babylon. Everything is here. We have plenty of food, water, and everything. It's a beautiful place. But so what's missing, all that's missing is good relationships, good human relationships. So we started talking about helping one another and brotherly love, love your neighbor as yourself. From there, we get all this approach. This is where it was born with Abraham. So the group that Abraham put together out of all the residents of Babylon who came over to him, he called them Israel. Why Israel? Because they were aiming for the upper force, for the one force of nature. And he also called them Jews, Yehudim. Jews, Yehudim, comes from the word Yehudi, meaning united, because they wanted to unite as one man with one heart. And since then, we've had the same method, which is basically the Torah. The Torah, the law, that we have to be together, united with one another. In the end, Nimrod expelled them, and Abraham, along with his entourage, with the people who went with him, he wandered to the land of Canaan, where Israel is now. Then they went down to Egypt, came out of Egypt, and the whole historic process, we know it already. But what did happen was that there was a huge chasm that was created between Abraham's group and the rest of the Babylonians. Abraham's group, Maimonides writes that they were tens of thousands, but they were still a tiny fraction of the 3 million or so that were in Babylon. So this group kind of disconnected from the Babylonians and took upon itself a different task, a different meaning to life, to be as one man with one heart, to be connected among them, to help one another, to be in brotherly love, love your neighbor as yourself, all those mottos, but they really lived them out. And that became the basis of the group that became a nation. But it's not a nation like the rest of the nations, because there is no biological closeness between them. They didn't develop from the same kind of initial parents that developed from them. Here you don't have it. Here they're all different. But at the same time, they all have the same ideological direction. So this is called the people of Israel, and it's very different. It's different in their nature, because they position themselves in a position of brotherly love, of loving one another, while the rest of the Babylonians went the opposite way, toward competitiveness. Over the years, the group called the people of Israel didn't succeed in overcoming their egos, which constantly grew from generation to generation to generation as an evolutionary process. And it too became an egoistic society. And then there was seemingly no difference between them and the rest of the nations that evolved in the meantime. But the disconnect remained. And to this day, there's a difference between an ostensible approach to life of the people of Israel and the approach to life of the rest of the nations. The truth is, there's no difference anymore. Both are egoistic. But the root remains, and that hatred remains. And to this day, every person in the world, in the end, criticizes the people of Israel and thinks the Jews, something the Jews are aliens who came from some planet. Some think that we are special and we have plans to overtake the world, etc., etc. It all stems from that same point of disconnection of Abraham from the rest of the Babylonians. The rest of the Babylonians said, we're going with Nimrod, with our egos, to succeed and profit. And Abraham said, no, we're only going toward closeness to each other and love our neighbors as ourselves. And those two methods basically exist to this day, seemingly. But the whole world, including today's people of Israel, they're all in their egoistic mindset, and only a tiny group, a tiny fraction of humanity, of the people of Israel, a group that's called Kabbalists, those who engage in the wisdom of Kabbalah, they implement Abraham's method. And to this day, that's the way it is. So if people ask, what's happening in the world, then Kabbalists are saying this: everything that's happening in the world, for better or worse, depends on the people of Israel, on the extent to which they get closer to carrying out love your neighbor as yourself or not. And to this day, that's what happens.
Rob Laitman is a great teacher, and I learned a lot from him, actually, not personally, but from videos. And having the chance to have him now in direct, I'm driven to ask a few questions. And my first question, based on all this big idea that you have, is when you mention ego, what do you mean about ego? How would you define this ego that you see as a problem, both in the nations and in the land, in the people of Israel?
Ego זה לסדר את עצמו על חשבון הזולת.
Ego means putting yourself in order, bettering yourself, your own situation at the expense of others. What exists within a person above your basic vital force as an animal. I want to succeed at the expense of someone else. This is called the ego. If I just want to live, to sleep, to raise a family, that's no egoism. But where I come in competition with others in order to win at their expense, this is egoism. In other words, our whole society, our whole civilization is egoistic, clearly egoistic.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I'm thinking, if you allow me, of perhaps an alternative way of defining ego, which is not contradictory to what Rob Laitman is saying, which is that the way in which I understand ego, which, for instance, psychology, Freud, and a lot of thinkers define it different way, is a part of us that is not all of us. It's a part of us that is in a way operating and actually believing it's the boss, but it's not all who we are. And the problem with that is basically that we are not acting according to who we really are, which is, I understand what Rob Laitman is basically saying. Like, if you don't know who you are, you'll basically end up doing nonsense and clashing with people because you don't understand your place in the universe. And this is the what Rob Laitman calls wisdom of Kabbalah, which I I agree. It's also present in all spiritual traditions. It's like from Socrates, it's a life worth living is only a life of wisdom. We have it also, well, in Abraham, in Lech Lecha, go to yourself, inquire, and then he moves first, goes to himself, and then knows where to go. And I think it's a very key and basic advice for the Jews and for everyone else. If we don't know what's our place in the universal symphony, we'll end up clashing with each other. And I think the problem of anti-Semitism, as the problem with any hatred, is the fact that something is bothering us, but we don't fully understand what is it. And that thing that is bothering us usually has to do with ourselves, actually. It's some part of ourselves that we cannot fully integrate, and we need to project in the other, which is actually also, I think, very in line with what Dr. Laitman said, that you see the other in competition, so whatever bothers you, you sort of put the burden on the other and get rid of that. But since that is yours, it will always keep on coming back and bothering you. And I think this is the problem. The basic problem of anti-Semitism is the problem of consciousness of the Jews and consciousness of the other. I was reading yesterday, in anticipation for the interview, one remark that I remember that is very important in my field in communications. I remember the Prime Minister of Malaysia, former Prime Minister of Malaysia, Mahathir, once said in the Islamic conference, to all Muslim countries in the world, there are 1.3 billion, said, how is it possible that we are 1.3 million and the Jews are so little and we are losing? That's the way he sees the world. Doesn't matter. Like it's not possible. So you can see the hatred is it's not so difficult to understand where the hatred is coming from. He sees a problem that doesn't make sense. And that's what's bothering him and anyone else. When you have a problem and you know exactly what's going on and you know how to challenge it, how to channel it, you are not so enraged. Deep rage comes from a place in which you really don't know what's going on.
I'm hearing both of you. So essentially, it's just about letting everyone know, hey, we understand what's going on. We know what the problem is. Let us help you. Is this as simple? Is it as simple as that?
I would say an idea in all schools of modern psychology is that when you do your conscious work, the other will end up doing it. Because everything in the universe has a place. It's like a symphony. If you're the violinist and you're sitting in the place of the tuba player, then the tuba player won't have its place.
Right. So, Dr. Laitman, the wisdom of Kabbalah, I hear you talk about it all the time. You said that the Jews have to be the ones who start it. For some reason, there's a part in the system that has to go first. Is that true? Like it cannot happen with anyone else. It cannot emerge with any other group of people. This changing consciousness.
It has to start only from the Jews. Only from the Jews. And those who can really change the balance between them and in general change the whole world is only the Jews. It's that small group that's, how many are there? A few millions. And they're all disintegrated and dispersed and they oppose one another and they are scattered in every corner of the world. But still, that group and only that group can change the face of the earth and put the world in order, finally, some good order. And that's the problem. So they are right, the rest of the nations, when they ask, what is going on here? But none of them know the answer, and the Jews themselves don't know the answer. That's the problem. When will Jews want to know what is going on? That former Prime Minister of Malaysia and the rest of the Muslims want to know what is happening, but the Jews don't want to know. This is our ego, which grew since Babylon in such a way that we've become more egoistic than everyone else. And we really will have no correction unless we can connect according to the same method that Abraham established of love your neighbor as yourself. But you understand how much more difficult it is for the Jews and for everyone else? We are the most dispersed, more disintegrated than any other nation. We can't do it. And this is why we suffer. And because of us, the whole world, all of humanity, is suffering. And the nations are right in saying that the Jews are to blame for all the problems. They understand it, they feel it from within nature. You can't lie about it. Their hatred is constantly getting reinforcement from nature itself. And we basically are the ones who create it. If we got closer to each other, then there's no doubt we would change the whole form of humanity, the whole form of the world, of nature, all the nations of the world. We are managing them in that sense, because we are in contrast with each other in conflict. What are we going to do?
Yeah, what are we going to do? Dario, you're working on an interesting project right now. Maybe you can tell a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's related to the pandemic. I work in the interfaith field as well, in communications. And the pandemic, I think, brought something sociologically very interesting. Of course, you can see it from many angles. But I will tell you something that an image that brings to me from the time where I was a kid. I remember when I was a kid, I used to like UFO movies, alien movies and alien TV series. And when you see all these movies, even Independence Day, like later movies when I was not a kid any longer, they all start in the same way. Life is going on in the world as usual. Everyone is there doing their own business. And suddenly something appears in the sky, everywhere. And it's always the same scene. You see Rome, New York, Jerusalem, and everyone suddenly looks at the same place. And that's the interesting shift that this pandemic is that we are all living it differently. It's not that it equalizes, because of course, if you're in quarantine in a big house with a garden, you're not having the same time that a person, I don't know, is living in a shanty town in India or in Argentina and, doesn't have space. But there's one thing that is common to all, that is we are all paying attention to the same thing. We're all focused on the same thing. It's like the spaceship in the sky. Of course, the spaceship is a metaphor. It's like something you suddenly realize, all this you are going about in your everyday life, it's not what's relevant. There is a shift suddenly. And, it is definitely an opportunity to, when you shift your consciousness, you suddenly start seeing things you were not seeing before. This is the basic, in mindfulness, in any basic consciousness work. For instance, a basic meditation exercise, you pay attention to breath. Breath is something that is there all the time, but you're not noticing, you're not conscious of. Once you pay attention to something that is so central and so important and so unconscious, you realize that the ego, what Dr. Laitman calls the ego, that this thing, that it's not reality, that really the essence is somewhere else. And that's the exercise I think we all should be doing. I'm not sure we are doing it with enough depth, but I trust that the universe, God, knows what He's doing. So
should we, Dr. Laitman, should we wait for the universe, or do we need to do something? Like, what is the role of Jewish people now in the middle of this pandemic, where we've seen them?
Leo, before that, let me say one thing about the Jews in relation to...
אני רוצה שהחבר שלנו יסגור את הדברים האלה עם קורונה-וירוס.
I hope you remember this with the coronavirus, that it appeared out of the sky, so to speak. This virus that we are in right now, It's something also as if that came from the depth of nature, so to speak, and it suddenly appeared on everyone, and everyone's looking at it as if up on the sky, to the sky. And then what happens? What do you think?
Okay, so here's the thought, Dario.
So there's one thing that brought to my mind when this thing about that it has to start with the Jews. And I like to see things, it's not that I disagree with that, but I would look at it in a symbolic way. And I make this clarification because I think not everyone in the audience or out there in general look at things symbolically. Sometimes they take things literally, and that could create confusion. So if we take in symbolic terms, and as Dr. Laitman says, a Jew, Yehudi, is a Yehudi, is someone who unifies. And if we understand ego as something that is separated from the whole of you, basically, then whoever is not unifying, and if you understand Jew for that, whoever is not unifying is creating a problem. So it has to start by the unifiers. But I say...
Well, the question is, who is doing this? According to our foundation, only those who are drawn to connection with others. And today, it no longer matters if you're a Jew or from any other faith or nation in the world. Those who are drawn toward unity are called Jews. Those who object to it and follow their egos are called non-Jews, Gentiles, nations of the world. That's it.
Okay, it's an interesting definition. I just made the clarification because I fully, I think it's a possible definition, but I'm not sure everyone takes that definition. So I think it's important because basically what you're saying is anyone who is drawn to the unity, and I think that could be anyone in the world. I mean, it's not up to me or to anyone to say, because everyone knows what's their drive, or they don't
of
know
course.
what they have to do.
He is called Jew. Anyone who's drawn toward unity, because that's what happened in the days of Abraham. So what's changed? You can take a person from any place in the world, from any nation, faith, belief system, you name it. If he agrees to unite with others, to be in connection with others, from that moment on, he is called Jewish, a Jew, Yehudi. He's called Yehudi.
Yeah, we see that our great Rabbi Akiva, who came up with a lot of you friends yourself, right? Not a Jew originally, a lot of non-Jews who came into the Jewish fold over the years. So
the concept is evidently present everywhere, even outside people who came into the tradition. But I do agree that in terms of the symbols of our tradition, it's totally valid to speak in that way. But I also would make the distinction that some people would call this symbol of unity with a different name. But I think it's totally fine to present our view and say, this is, as Rabbi Laitman says, this is the way we understand it. And it can resonate or it doesn't. That doesn't matter. You can do your part. And as long as we are feeling that we are doing our part, that's the best we can do. Then the rest, there's a part in which it's in the hands of God in the universe. It's the only thing we can do is to take this conscious step. I think what Abraham did, Lech Lecha, like start walking into that direction. And then you will see. That's the story in Abraham. Like God told him, like, go and then you'll see. And a lot of things happened to Abraham. It's not that he foresaw what it was going to happen, at least in the narrative, he goes through a lot of trouble.
Nature is doing the same exercise to us, the same trick kind of pulling on us. Through this virus, it's pushing us to think, it's forcing us to think, to introspect, to reflect on how we should live. And it's arranging us in such a way that we have to disconnect from one another so as to understand that if we want to come out of our homes and come in contact with one another, again, it has to be a different kind of connection. We will see this in the coming days. that are approaching, we will see that we are unable to resume business as it was before, and all those self-centered businesses that we operated before, we won't be able to operate them. It'll be difficult everywhere, gradually. It'll be gradual, but we will see that we cannot succeed in reestablishing those companies, those businesses, those selfish relationships that we were used to for the last several thousands of years, actually thousands of years. We won't be able to resume them, to resume their operations now. This virus will set things in a new order. And we will be able to see this from day to day. Until we understand that, except for a relation of connection, a good relation to others, this has to be the basis of the new society, not the ego, but connection, not separation, but connection. That's it. And then we will need to start learning all over, establish a new society, new education for all the people in the world. And of course, there will be problems with the Jews here because everyone will blame the Jews of what is happening until we establish this network of teaching that explains to everyone what is going on. This is basically what's going to happen. It's not something that will pass from today to tomorrow. It won't go away. It'll only get worse.
So, Dr. Laitman, I have to ask. So, I think I understand who are the Jews in this picture, not the religious definition, legal or anything, but this quality in the system. But who are the Kabbalists in this system? What is that?
Kabbalists understand where things are coming from. They learn the laws of the inner nature, the deeper nature, and how the upper force, which is the desire to bestow, to give, how it wants to reveal itself within all the people in the world, the still vegetative, animate, and human. And in all the people, all the humans, there is a small group that has to practice it. This is why we're called the chosen people. We are chosen in the sense that we have to reveal among ourselves that integral law and bring humanity also to that integralness. All of nature, the still vegetative and animate, and it should be people too. They all have to be connected with each other like a sphere, in an integral way, with mutual support. And were it not for human beings, that's how nature would exist. This is why we, as human beings, have to make it happen. Have to come to a state where we all belong to one nature in mutual support. And the most important here are the Jews, because they have the method in them of achieving integral connection. Let's hope we can make this known to all the Jews, and today it's actually to the whole world, before the pressures will come upon us again from all of humanity. That's the way it is. We are in a very special time and special situation. I hope that soon we will feel these pressures more and more. But this is also why we have to hasten the education, the dissemination, the circulation of telling everyone what's going on, why. Today there are no limitations on anything except to circulate to everyone what we must do. Jews and non-Jews alike. Anyone who wants unity is called Jew already.
So I want to ask, because Dario here he's a media professional. He's done a lot of work in the media, but I also see the media as this very negative force as well, spreading misinformation and biased information and all of that. And I want to ask both of you, how do you see the role of the media in this change? Is this something we have to just put aside and not touch and just work on the connection between people, or can the media be harnessed somehow? How do you see it? I want to hear both of you.
Okay, can I start? Okay, so I think when we talk about the media, we have to make the media, especially today, there are so many media. There are different things in the media. So I will make a distinction for us to reflect between what we see in the news, in news shows, and the way in which normally brands communicate. For instance, a brand like big brands like Coca-Cola, Nike, whatever you want. And here you will see immediately a very big difference. News shows, the news generally want you to get a very quick unconscious reaction. And that reaction works much better with bad news, because basically our ego, our separateness has an instinct of preservation. So whenever we see out there something that may threaten us, we pay attention, and we have an addiction to paying attention to this, because every time something bad happens, something in us awakens us. It's like it's a bit of a drug, but it doesn't go anywhere, of course, because life is not. We know well, life is not only about self-preservation. Self-preservation is important because otherwise consciousness doesn't exist. We need the physical recipient. But if we stay only in that level, life doesn't go anywhere. It's like a movie that it's not going anywhere. But see how brands work. Like brands that want to sell, I'm not advocating for brands, but just understanding how they think. They want to develop a long-term relationship with someone. And how do they do it? With bad news? No. If you see the way in which Coca-Cola, Nike communicates, they're trying to create happiness, they're trying to create inspiration, because that's what creates long-term relationships. This is, I think, what we need to understand in terms of when we see the media. I mean, the media is just something out there. It's a mirror, and it exists only if we look at it. If we stop looking, I think there was an episode in The Simpsons in which the ads become alive, and
and then they stop looking and they disappear.
It's like, just stop looking at them. It's look at yourself. Lech lecha. Just understand how this is working, that the media has these two influences, but your goal is not to react to the news and not to become a friend of Coca-Cola, with all due respect to Coca-Cola. Your goal is to create that relationship with yourself. And so once you do that, the role of the media becomes increasingly less important. I would say, in my experience, the people who really are connected with themselves and work with themselves care less about the news, read less newspapers.
So, Dr. Laitman, is the future? Does it have no media in it, not news or brands, because they both want something from you, or do we still need media? How do you see media helping us today to go through this change?
אני לא משתמש במילים שלכם ובהגדרות שלכם.
I don't know your definitions, and I can't use your words because it's not my terminology. But it seems to me that we really need the media because we want to draw toward connection, all the people in the world. So first we have to explain to them that their good future depends only on the level of connection between them. So this awareness and the proofs of it, we have to convey to all the nations and to every person. If we succeed in doing this, then it's our benefit. The world will be happy. And if we don't, we will find ourselves in war. Because according to the wisdom of Kabbalah, we can find ourselves in another world war easily. And then what will remain of humanity is a few couples who will continue the species, but that's about it. So we have to see how these things can get out of hand and we can lose control of them. Look what's happening in the United States and between the US and China, everywhere actually. It's very dangerous. So our question is, how do we call it through the media or whatever, how can we convey to all of humanity the problem that everything depends only on the good connection between people, and that good connection is in our hands. We can explain, we can teach. We have thousands around the world. Actually, it's millions. So the question is, how can we come to every person with an explanation about what our good future depends on? I need the media. Let's work together. You're a handsome guy.
No, I fully agree with what Dr. Laitman is saying, and I'd say the key is connecting to the media consciously. And if you pay attention to the word media is a mediation. We ultimately are using the mediation for other purpose. You can think of a metaphor in religiosity with a ritual. Like you perform a ritual for connection, but if you're performing the ritual unconsciously, just because it's a commandment or whatever, it doesn't work. So I think we need to approach the media in the same way, having a very clear conscious drive on what's our purpose and what we are doing. In the same way that the current people who manage the media have that drive, like the people in the news know what they are doing when they put bad news and in the way they edit. And in the same way, the people who manage brands know what they are doing when they try to generate a certain feeling in people. The key is that we all become conscious of that. So we are all, in a way, doing the same work. There's no one doing the work for us, but we are doing this integration and connection work, which I think we have an opportunity to do that every day with the person next to us, with the person in the shop, and eventually people who have access and capacity to create communication products with a broader reach.
And is the media always going to be there, or are we going to eventually transcend even that physical necessity? For me to turn on the phone, to feel, to connect with what's going on. Is there a way to bypass that eventually? Where are we going? Maybe Dr. Laitman and also Dario, I want to hear the picture of where the world is going to and the role of the Jews in it, with media, without media. Where is it?
אני אגיד בקצרה.
I'll tell you briefly. We will be able to connect to the field where we all exist. It's not a field of radio waves or television frequencies, etc., but it's more, even subtler waves. We'll be able to connect to the field that is between us, that is actually among us, and we're all in it. We won't need these instruments that we have here. Yeah, these. We won't need them. Instead, we will be in mutual connection without dialing one another. We will be so connected that we won't need any modem, any medium in between us. Nothing. And then we will give to one another more clearly, and will influence one another more clearly. We do it already, actually, but it's very crass right now. It's very remote, and it's not very powerful. Soon we will feel that we are connected through one field, and we influence one another, we receive from another, we give to each other, and this is the real media, the real communication that we will discover that it exists within nature. It's inside of nature. But for this, we have to have the mutual power of bestowal, of giving, and not the mutual force of reception. I have to want to give to others and not to receive from them only. This is what we are missing. We're missing the other force. Besides the minus, we also need the plus. And then we will be able to create this modulations and communication correctly. I really hope it'll happen. Well, I know it'll happen. The question is when. But this requires educating people. When I look at this last generation, the one that's growing now, it seems to me like they are drawn to it more and more. They feel that it needs to be, that it's not about phones anymore, that soon that the interest in dealing with it is kind of waning. They want more rapid connection, more immediate connection between people, even without words, just like that, from heart to heart, from feeling to feeling, where each understands the other openly, without any barriers along the way. This is the future communication. I really hope we'll get to it. And then, of course, we will have to be different. In order to communicate with others, I won't be able to hide myself behind text messages and other apps of communication. It won't help me. I'll be an open book to others. And then I will have to rise above my ego. Well, it'll be a better world.
Dario, what's your picture of the world as we move into it and the role of Jews in it?
Well, amen, amen, to what Rabbi Laitman said. Well, I do think I'm also optimistic. I think that this ultimately everything, realizing our place in the world, our relation to others, all this that we are talking about, it's a constant exercise of mindfulness, or becoming more mindful of what the laws of nature, of what is this about. And also, I think all spiritual traditions and even secular modern psychology have always worked towards helping people in this direction. We haven't yet succeeded fully in pushing everyone in that direction, but that's been since the dawn of time. It's like an essential human problem, and I think this situation has infused some more mindfulness into the world, because now you have to pay attention to things you were not paying attention before. Every time you go to the street, since there is a risk, like at the beginning, the reason why you pay attention is because there is a risk, there is a virus. But that means that every time you go to the world, you have to think, does it make sense that I do this? I am doing this just mindlessly, or it really makes sense? Am I exposing others? So that's a first shift of mindfulness. Even I remember, when now there are a bit more cars, but when the streets were so quiet, you realize the noise pollution that every car does. Every time you take out the car, you can think, when you realize that, it's like, am I going to put this pollution out there? It's thinking about things we were not thinking before, on how everything that we do is actually affecting the world and others. And this is something that it's in our tradition, most traditions. I think the Talmud says that, if you eat and you don't bless, you are stealing from the world. Because if you eat mindlessly and you don't realize that by the sole act of eating, you are affecting the world, even if you need to eat because you're a recipient for consciousness, like in a good, but you have to be mindful about that. And I think this pandemic infused that a little dose, at least a little, depending on the person, of being more mindful, that I think pushes people in that direction. How do we will go from there? I would go back to Abraham. Abraham has many stations in his story, so he doesn't know. He goes to Canaan, then he goes to exile in Egypt, then he has problems with Lot. Like in every station, there will be a challenge, a test. But the key is to pass that test consciously. And that's what I think will ultimately make us forget about separateness and feel this ideal that Dr. Laitman is talking about. And I think it's what will really make us happy. Separativeness doesn't make us happy, because everything we exclude comes back to us. It's a bit what I said at the beginning, and it angers us, and we're not sure why it angers us.
So this is okay. So I guess this is something that if you feel yourself Jewish out there, then that's what you have to roll your sleeves and start doing. Basically, help bring everyone to that sense of that conscious connection. All right, I have more questions, but we have to conclude. Thank you so much, Dario. Thank you, Dr. Laitman. Thank you for spending this 45 minutes talking about the most ancient problem of Jew hatred, and hopefully maybe we heard some ideas about how to solve it. Thank you. Please like, subscribe, comment. We want to hear more about those honest conversations. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.